And you're live.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Uh, it is July 10th. This is the July Annapolis Conservancy Board meeting. I am your chair, Jack Turner, and I'm going to call this meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This evening we have two guests, or maybe special guests from the Annapolis Environmental Commission. We have the chair, Kathy Welker is here, and I believe the co-chair, Alicia Roberson, are both here. And I think between the Conservancy Board and the Environmental Commission, uh, I think we see a pathway to kind of working together on some of our common goals. And so I think Kathy had expressed some interest in interfacing with us, and we thought that this was the perfect forum to introduce the Environmental Commission and the Conservancy Board, and talk a little bit about how we think we could work together, or at least make a plan for how we could figure out how to work together. So uh, I would like to prioritize that discussion at the beginning of our agenda, just to respect everyone's time, and then we can get into the rest of our agenda. So I think the first order, I will open the floor to Kathy and Alicia from the Environmental Commission. And Kathy and Alicia, I do apologize because I did not have enough time before the meeting to do a deep dive on uh, more fleshed out thoughts of how the Conservancy Board and the Environmental Commission can work together. But I would love to start that discussion now. And if you'd all like to introduce yourselves and just talk a little bit about the Environmental Commission, I think that would be wonderful.
Sure, thank you. The Annapolis Environmental Commission, we have, when we're fully filled with members, 9 members. We are a couple short, and we're actually in the process of we put the word out in a few places. We're trying to recruit some new members. So if you know anybody in Annapolis who would like to be on the Environmental Commission, please mention them to us. We have a Facebook page, and I posted a notice on there, so you can find us on Facebook. We meet monthly, except we won't be meeting in August. But we do have, each year we do set out a list of our priorities for the year. And they really haven't changed a lot from year to year, because as I found, I've been on the commission for about a year and a half now, meeting just once a month. It takes a while to get things right, to get things really done, right? Big things done. So we carry our priorities over from year to year. And so I just wanted to go over, let you know like what our priorities are. And then Alicia's going to talk about a specific project that Jackie and Dylan had suggested it might be something that we would like to look at doing, which I think is something you guys are possibly also doing, and I think is one of those places where we could potentially work together. Did you want to say something, Jack?
Oh, I just said excellent.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
So just to go over our priorities real quick, basically our first priority is to support the support alignment of environmental programs with Annapolis Ahead, with the comp plan. And so the main ways that we look at that we want to do that is we want to support the expansion and the maintenance of our current tree canopy in Annapolis. We want to encourage the adoption and widespread use of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure. And then also we want to increase public awareness and community involvement in environmental actions. And so especially with this priority, I think it fits very nicely with the project that Alicia is going to talk about. Our second priority is to support the city's efforts to reduce carbon emissions and increase resilience in the face of future climate conditions. And so as Jackie and Dylan start working on the city's resilience plan, the commission will be able to provide input and reviews on that and support the development of that plan. We also want to support the efforts, the city's resilience, and by reducing collective carbon footprint, mitigating flood risk, increasing alternative energy options, and improving the quality of the local environment. And so some of the ways we want to do that is to help support those short-term priorities of expanding the EV use and the city's use of EVs, and the completion of the greenhouse gas inventory that the Office of Sustainability and Resilience is working on. And then finally, the last priority is to strengthen community access through environmental efforts. So, that includes improving, the improvements to the quality of the local environment that are a benefit for all city residents. So that includes like public access to waterways and green spaces. And then also to explore options and make recommendations to the city council, staff, and mayor for solutions that address resilience challenges of underserved Annapolis community members. And this is another area where we feel that the project that Alicia is going to talk about will, address that priority also. So that's kind of where, we try to keep our focus. It's pretty broad, so there's a lot that falls under those, those priorities. But there's so much going on in the city, environmental wise, that it's, for me, it's been hard, being fairly new to this, kind of hard to keep up with all the activity that's going on and all the work that comes out of the Resilience and Sustainability Office that Dylan and Jackie do. It's pretty impressive, the amount of different projects they have. So, the commission would just like to be able to support that work, make recommendations, do research, whatever, what's helpful to the city. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the priorities, or we can just jump over to Alicia and she can talk about some of the work that the commission would like to get into.
Well, I'll just make a quick statement here, Kathy. That's all you do? Maybe you should have started with what you don't do. Would have been a shorter list, because there is. I took a couple notes while you were talking there. That is, it makes me feel like we should be doing a lot more for what this city appointed board is assigned to do.
Well, I think there's a lot of overlap in the priorities, right? So like if you're looking at this one thing, so many of the other things, if you're working on one thing, it's going to address multiple priorities too. So it's not like a million,
right?
Hopefully it's not a million little things. Yeah.
Right. Which is one of the opportunities, I think, and challenges with the environment, is that it kind of permeates a little bit of everything. And even within just the environmental stuff, it even, there's a lot of overlap. So
oh yes, definitely. Like, when you look at economic impacts and social impacts and things like that too, that's why we like to include, improving the quality of life for citizens in the city, too, through these environmental efforts.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think as time goes on, between now and we only meet every other month. So we actually even have less meetings per year. And so I understand, setting these ambitious goals and priorities, and then things tend to carry over because only so much can get done as a fully volunteer group and only meeting kind of intermittently. But, I would encourage all of the members of the Conservancy board to think about ways that we could work with you all at the Environmental Commission to accomplish kind of shared goals. And I think even just with the introduction there that you gave, Kathy, which was wonderful, there's a lot of opportunity for working together in pursuit of a better environment in the city. So yeah, I'm happy to field any, like Kathy said, happy to field any questions from the board, or Alicia, if you'd like to, jump into the project that you're working on, that would be great.
Sure. I'm Alicia, by the way. And so as we were kind of reviewing our priorities this year, we realized that there's probably also some overlap with the Conservancy board and your guys' initiatives. So that's mainly why we wanted to reach out. Something that we've been looking at is, as Kathy mentioned in our priorities, increasing tree canopy and also conserving spaces, turning them into environmental spaces or habitat and whatnot. So Dylan provided us with a map of land or parcels within the city limits that could potentially benefit from being converted into reforested areas, parks, and other green spaces for residents to use. So he, I think, just sent a new map this week, and we're currently looking at that to kind of see what areas might be beneficial for us to implement these priorities. And we wanted to introduce that to you guys as well, because like I said, we think that there would be some overlap in, what we're interested in doing.
And Dylan, I'm just now realizing that I did not share the map that you sent yesterday with the ACB, but I will do that in short order.
So we're just starting to look at all this. We just talked about it at our last month meeting, and Dylan shared the map that he had created showing us the different parcels, but we're still in the very early stages of all this.
So, Alicia, what are the goals of this? Are to increase tree canopy and just evaluate if there's additional environmental spaces for wildlife habitat or just conservation in general that could be added to the city's, portfolio.
So there's a lot of different things that could be done with it. So the first one is, as the AEC, one of AEC's top priorities has been increasing tree canopy, and they want 50% of tree canopy by 2050.
Right.
In our meeting with the city forester last year, he explained that there is not enough land owned by the city to achieve that. So that's part of the reason why we're looking at this, to see what land that it might be beneficial for the city to consider procuring in order to reforest to achieve that goal. Other goals also do include, actually creating parks for residents, but then through that we would want the city to focus on nature-based solutions and, implementing green infrastructure in those spaces.
This board, we
Jack, could you
spent,
share that?
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jack, are you going to email that out, or you could put it in the chat?
Yeah, let me forward this right now. And this is uh a web map. Dylan, I wonder if you could speak just briefly on what the map is, or Alicia.
Sorry, it's Alicia.
Alicia, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the map, it's basically a web viewer that allows you to look at different environmental qualities throughout the city. We created a few different, layer types that represent sort of characteristics of specific parcels, kind of as the city as a whole, and then also census tracts. You're able to pull up impervious area by census tract. You're able to pull up what else is in there? Low to moderate income census tracts. You're able to pull up majority minority census tracts. So it's got that environmental justice indicator in there. You're also able to pull up the tree canopy, so that'll actually show you. And this was a really impressive study that was done. It shows you basically all of the trees throughout the city basically represented as polygons. And it really is that accurate. Not 100%, but pretty darn close. It also has the impervious surface throughout the city. So it'll actually show you where the largest swaths of green space are available. And I've actually color coded that. So I basically took that large polygon and I exploded it so that any closed polygon can basically be categorized by its area. So you'll see in darkest purple the largest area, and in light yellow the smallest areas. So that kind of like allows people to see very easily, like where's the largest parcels basically, that, could be conserved, for environmental, benefit, along with some other details, that can provide some indicators. And then also the current conservation easements, kind of as they're, well, we've been talking in this, commission, a few times by now, that the current easement layer might not be the most accurate in the world, but, the current working layer, and then also, what DPZ had designated as, prospective or, hopeful conservation areas, in the comprehensive plan. So just like really throws the whole, kitchen sink, at what's potentially conservable, in the city, and just allows, a good point of reference, for the Environmental Commission or the Conservancy Board, to get a really good look at, where the best areas are, for the most benefit. I hope that's a good synopsis of it. But yeah, I've tested it a couple times now. It looks like the web layer or the web map is available to use. Again, for reference purposes only. Um, just for the two, conservation and environmental commission, advisory boards. But yeah, that's basically the map.
Wow. This is incredible. I mean, this is, for our Conservancy board, we have been reviewing kind of the green space map, the greenways map.
Which we made. So
Yes.
let me just-
Thank you, Karen. And sorry, Karen, I'm sorry. You've had your hand up, please.
Yeah, so we actually spent a significant amount of time, like years, putting together a greenway corridor map, which is what the DPZ map is. It's
That's
what we
great.
put together.
That's
It came
awesome.
from the Conservancy
I
board.
didn't even know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we asked for it to be included in the comprehensive plan. So we already have like we went through and identified our priorities for conservation, and we were looking at creating green corridors and protecting waterways, protecting wetlands where they exist. And also we were keeping in mind also like trying, I think Kathy, you mentioned one of the priorities was like serving like disadvantaged communities. And so we were looking at that as well. So I think like maybe a great first step would be for us to compare maps. And if there are parcels that you guys are looking at, they're on the map that where we identified corridors that we want to preserve, that would be a great place to start, probably.
I agree. I wasn't even aware of the map, so this is why we needed to have the discussion.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think so. I think just from a cursory look that the prospective conservation areas layer on here is the same as that.
That's my understanding. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, this is a great tool to start building from. And so Karen, I hear you talking about action steps, things we can actually do to work together and try to advance this project. And it's something similar that we've talked about on the Conservancy board is, looking at this one particular layer of prospective conservation areas. How do we start to prioritize? I mean, there's no way that we can tackle all of them at once. And if we're lucky, we can tackle one or two at once. So how do we start to prioritize which conservation areas are the most important, and what constitutes being most important? What are the highest values and function that we're trying to achieve here? So I think answering that question, if it's not yet been answered, is kind of key to how we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like parcels that have a potential to add a lot of trees to the canopy, like add to that number, would be a good place to start.
Yeah. Sorry, what?
Alicia, hi, this Tom Lippert. Just a question. I believe you were raising it. Please chime in, either of you ladies. We have an overall. I guess I'm looking at definitions. If we're looking at a goal of 50% by X number of years out, and the city itself owns enough in order to have a significant impact on it, then that's one answer. Or if the impact is 50% of the entire city, which will include individual homeowners, will include their landscaping, will include other things. In other words, come up with a firm definition of what the goal is going to be. You're mentioning about trying to concentrate on who does what to whom and when. But if you did decide to go one route, you had a maintenance or a view and an opinion on what you want to do. Therefore, there might be some homes or homeowners that the tree planting people and the arborists might want to say, hey, we can help you build more or have more coverage, because what the city is hoping to do, and you as part of the city will be able to have X number of coverage for the city as a whole, as opposed to the city working kind of like as an island all itself. And then you've got all the homeowners working as an island or working through the homeowners association by themselves. You're going to end up with two separate figures, and maybe a clear definition of maybe you all, environmental, and get Jack from Conservancy, or get the right amount of heads, get them all moving in the right direction, saying, yeah, this is kind of what we would like to do. Does that go in lockstep with what the city wants to do? Because then you've got your backup and support. Then you've got some direction that's coming, instead of a whole lot of very well-meaning individuals in the city, but everybody is having difficult times having and holding on to people, because we are mobile. But it's a long-range plan and goal. I'll stop babbling.
No, you're fine. So this goal was set by the commission, I believe, the commission
Well,
years ago.
it's the city
in
goal.
conjunc-
I don't
Sorry.
think it's I don't think it's a commission goal. I think it's the city's goal.
Okay, so I know that the commission has supported it for years at this point, in conjunction with one of the members who is part of Annapolis Trees. And the idea behind this priority is to focus on tree canopy coverage over the entire city of Annapolis.
Public and private.
Public and private, correct. The focus is not on residents, because that's harder to manage, and we don't necessarily want to increase difficult relationships with residents. And what we do want to do, though, is talk with more residents and educating them on the benefits of planting trees and how to take care of their trees, and explaining, instead of just taking it down for X, Y, and Z reason, give them an incentive to want to keep their trees. I'm on the HOA board for my association, and trees is a big issue, every year. And so I know that boards are doing the best they can to keep the trees, but like, there are maintenance fees, there are reasons they need to come down, and we can only plant so many. So a way to increase that quicker is by looking at like reforestation projects. But the idea is that it's technically measured by tree canopy coverage, depending on so the forester did go through this whole long exercise of saying you could achieve this coverage with this amount of trees planted and growing over these many years, and you'd reach X coverage by X year. Like, he did go through the whole process of saying, at the growth rate of these trees that we'd plant in these areas, this is like where you'd start to reach 50% tree coverage. But And this is partly why the budget for the city forester was increased, because they have this plan that they want to go forward with, and they know what they need to plant and all of that. But the main issue is they just don't have space technically. So that's now what they need to look at.
Alicia, is the forestry group, especially if they're getting, additional funding in order to be able to do that, are they also looking at the same goal, both public and private?
The
Again, looking at the population, if you identify, some citizens, you may be able to, accomplish that portion of the goal with getting them involved and still providing them some assistance with doing something which will help the city.
They're not looking at specifically private homeowners. They're looking at it as tree cover canopy in the city as a whole, but but they can only manage and maintain city-owned property, correct, Dylan? I think that's correct. Like,
Can you just repeat it one more time so I'm clear?
sorry, so my understanding is private tree canopy coverage is considered additional, or like as a benefit or negative, depending on if it's removed throughout the year, to the goal, but the city forester is only able to focus on trees within city property. So they can only plant within city-owned property or manage trees within city-owned property. They're not.
Yeah, yeah. That's my understanding. That's how it generally is. Obviously we'd like to encourage residents, but yeah, that's how it is.
But
so when he's calculating this, he's saying this is, year after year, this is how much has been removed or taken away by private and public entities, and then moving forward with that.
Right.
But even still, if all residents were to plant all, as many trees as possible on their property, we wouldn't be able to achieve the goal, was what the city forester was saying.
Right, but is he? And it may. I'm sorry, Dylan. Go ahead. I was going to say real quick, that would seem to be a role where the individual boards and committees could, be the handholder between private and the city, as far as, helping to raise the needs that are there. The city and the forestry folks can, handle the stuff that's on their side, but that doesn't mean that, we can't take that also into consideration as we're planning the overall bigger picture, especially if we hope to gain a goal like that.
Yeah.
I guess
why we have public education as one of our sub priorities, right? Because
and go hand in glove with that. Yeah.
So I don't know if I've heard, do we know what the delta is between existing canopy cover and what our target for 50%? I mean, do we know in acreage about what that may be?
I don't remember what it was. You could ask the city forester to give a presentation. He has a really great presentation about all of it. But it's been over a year since we've had it, so I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah.
And he may be doing an inventory too. I think Dylan is. Did I hear that at a meeting earlier this week?
That's correct.
Yeah.
An updated one, yes.
Because to me, it seems like, each additional percentage point towards 50 is going to be, there's not one big open field where we can plant trees. It's going to be it's going to be a little piecemeal and which I think is okay. It's just, I think, understanding how we get to 50% could kind of inform how we prioritize how we get there.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see that as identification of parcels, like to preserve, to conserve, like you were saying, is one of the metrics for deciding what parcels we might want to look at and recommend would be how it, maintaining that tree canopy, for instance, or a place to plant trees. I would also like to include, going back to what Karen said, like also like the social impact, right? Is it a place that's really going to contribute to the quality of life of a neighborhood that perhaps doesn't have, a lot of green space, or you want to make sure you maintain what green space is there for them. So that's another kind of point that I'd like to consider when we look at the map.
Sorry, I think Erin had a question earlier.
Oh, sorry, Erin, you did have a hand up at one point.
No, it's quite all right. Just looking at the GIS, it sounds like there's a new inventory being done. It looks like the tree canopies, like, I don't know, is it a 10-meter resolution? Is there a new one that's going to be a little bit higher than that?
I'm not totally sure what the new one will be.
And then secondly, like, if we're going to figure out which easements to target, you just can you subtract, figure out which polygons have the most unforested area and then rank them and then just target those.
Yeah, that could definitely work. I could add that.
Kind of like a union or a disunion.
At least as a starting place, like these are the ones that the committee's already targeted as, like, these are places we'd like to conserve, and these ones have the most unforested area.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So what we really need is we need a GIS. We need a full-time GIS analyst.
I think that's Dylan.
And then we're really going to get somewhere.
I certainly know, I think there's a couple of properties that are either city or county or state owned that if there's no plans to build on them, we should at least plant them. But that's just a separate point. I don't know that they're necessarily conservation easement candidates, but anyway, it's just an observation.
Thanks, Aaron.
Kind of along those lines, it's also been floated in the past, the idea of trying to buy, like, if there are parcels in areas where there's like condemned buildings or something, to try to like acquire those parcels to repurpose it as a park, especially like in underserved communities.
Okay.
And I'll just add, and this doesn't really address conserving properties, but I know that planning and zoning, when they're talking to, like, for instance, there's a new auto zone, I think, going in on West Street. So they're working with the auto zone people they're going to plant 3 like large trees. They're going to add to, try and get people to, commercial properties to add trees where it's possible too, which isn't really connected to what we're trying to do, but just wanted to throw that out there, that there is some eyes on commercial too, and they contribute.
Yeah, Kathy, absolutely. I think that is one of the pathways to get to 50%. It's each tree is going to come into play, because there's not a 50-acre piece of land that could get 50 acres of trees added to it. It's going to be, I think, how I see it, the pathway forward is smaller chunks that are going to all have to add up to that 50%.
Which is what we're aware of, and this is why we requested the meeting with the city forester last year, because I'd pointed out, I was like, I mean, the first question to him was, do we even have technically enough planting space? And if you include all of the trees in Annapolis, if we can ever achieve that.
Yep.
And it was decidedly pointed out that we do not. So now we're looking at, okay, if it's still going to be a priority and a goal, and we haven't been able to achieve it yet, now we're at the next stage of like, well, what are the creative solutions to figuring this out? Like, I think, wasn't it pushed? It was pushed from 2030 to 2050 now, right?
I don't remember, but that kind of does ring a bell.
I'm pretty certain in our last round of priorities, we pushed it. So, and this has been something that's been a priority for a long
time. I believe is 50 by 50.
Okay.
50 by 50. Well, and then there's the opportunity with there are so many different great nonprofit organizations, right, who are doing work like around watershed restoration and things like that. And so connecting with them and seeing what they're doing with trees as part of watershed restoration, or for instance, the Amory Project, right, Jack? Are there opportunities there too to preserve trees or add trees?
Mhm. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just, reforestation easement. It can still be a park, with tree plantings for shade coverage or whatever, and those count towards it. Or one of the other things why we wanted to see the easements on the map is because another part of our priority is increasing, bike friendly and walking transportation within the city and, bus transportation, X, Y, and Z. And you can have trees planted along the walkways, so it doesn't have to be strictly just reforestation, like easement, but that's kind of why we're looking at all of the prospects. But I think a forested park would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely. If we can keep the invasives out.
Ugh,
Is another
don't
one of
talk to me
our
about invasives.
another one of our priorities and kind of duties as assigned. So it's going to be a combination of public lands, private lands, which includes, the commercial, industrial, residential, institutional, and then the city properties, county properties, state property. It's, we've kind of got to look at all the potential options. And, I think one thing I'll say is the Greenscape program that the city's done for, I think they just passed 20 or 30, they just passed some milestone of a couple decades. And I don't know that they do a ton of trees. I think there are some trees associated with Greenscape program, but I don't know how successful it is giving trees or selling trees for a low cost to homeowners or businesses. I don't know how successful of a program that is. I don't have any background there, but if we just if the city were to, find a way to fund giving out trees, is that going to increase the canopy cover? And that sounds
Yeah.
like lower effort way to increase canopy. I don't know. I think getting creative is, I think all
yeah.
are kind of should be considered.
I've had that thought before, and there are a lot of areas in Annapolis that I've walked down where I'm like, why isn't this street lined with trees? And the big issue is homeowners don't want to deal with them. And so that's an issue that has to be looked at and figured out and how that can change. But even still, if you were to take into all of that residential space, my understanding is it's still not enough. So,
Well, I did pick up a free red bud at,
oh,
when was it,
cool.
January, February, that one watershed meeting. I think you were there, Jack. You talked there.
Yeah,
And so
I have one too. I have it growing in the backyard.
Well, mine's growing in a pot right now, but there's
Same.
a spot in the common area right out my window where we lost a tree a few weeks ago in a storm, and I'm planting it right there. So I'm going to replace that tree that fell down.
Well, if only we had 40,000 more residents, just like you,
I would do that.
We could go for 60%.
If everybody just plants one tree, yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I know the behavior change, like you're saying, homeowners don't want to deal with trees in their yard. I'm not a homeowner, I rent, so I don't really know what that's like, but I would love more trees around, but I guess that's not everyone's sentiment. So, and like you're saying, even if every homeowner across the city planted one tree, wouldn't necessarily get to the goal. But still, maybe still could add 1% or, have some benefit towards the 50% goal.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's good. We've had this discussion before as well, and I think it's good for you all to have that additionally. And it's why though we've kind of now we're looking at what's the biggest bang for our buck, or the biggest project we can do to help the city make a dent and also achieve other things that we're looking at in our priorities. And the city's talked about, wanting to acquire more park space and more green space. So that's why we're kind of looking at this project right now first, and then maybe tackling the private and homeowners down the line can be another addition to our goal. Um, so that's why we're looking at this. Dylan's made this map for us. We're having these discussions, and we wanted to talk about it with you all.
Appreciate that so much. And I mean, if there was one thing that this board could do in support of the tree canopy goal and the project that you're working on, is there an ask here that we could then consider and see how we can support that, or should we just continue our conversation and just be thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think the first ask would be if you can share your conservation map that you guys created with us, that would be helpful. And if you could review the map that Dylan's sent out, and I guess maybe if you have any knowledge of what you think would be like the high priority areas to look at, and then we can move from there, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I like the idea of agreeing on a set of criteria, maybe as we're all looking at these maps, that we're, have a prioritized list of criteria that we focus on. And so we've mentioned a couple of things here already.
Kathy,
So
Tom,
basically,
I'm-
sorry, I was just gonna say our map is what is in the comprehensive plan as like, it's
Okay.
either proposed or potential easements, future easements. That's what our
Okay.
map is.
But we do
We
there's
don't
an
have
interactive-
There's not a web-based, I guess there's not a web-based.
there's a
version.
web-based version that I can circulate.
Thank you.
is within the organization, this is Tom Lippert again, the chairs of the various committees are probably the best aware, at least, of which direction that everybody is trying to get to, within their own folks. Do you guys have a forum that you can get together and sit down and saying, well, shoot, we're doing that. No. Here's where we're doing ours. Oh, wait a minute. We're just calling it this, but it really means that. We may very well find that there's a lot more synergy that is available. It goes along with the old saying, if we don't necessarily care who gets the credit.
Yeah, there doesn't appear to be a meeting or a forum where the chairs of the commissions meet. But as you pointed out, it looks like, there seems to be some commonalities between them, and that's why we asked to meet with you all today.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. I know right after I started on this commission, the city brought together all the boards and commissions to let them know, like, okay, here's some of the rules, here's some of the things you need to be aware of. But we didn't have a chance, and we had a couple of discussions together. But I think it would be very helpful to be able to have a forum where we could do that, once
I don't
a
know
year.
That's something Dylan can chime in about.
Yeah, and prioritizing, coming up with all the heads nodding in the in the same direction if possible, as far as hey, here's something that I think we actually could accommodate and accomplish collectively, and present it as instead of a whole group of little well-meaning entities come back and saying, hey, we collectively believe that this is something that you're actually asking for. Are we right? Are we wrong? And if it is, here's what we can do for you. Here's a direction that we can follow collectively. So,
well, and I think also, which I think you made this point also, because each commissioner board has its own priorities and their own focuses, but
right.
Making sure that we're are we working on the same things, so we're not duplicating, right? Yep. Maybe not coming to agreement on priorities in general, but identifying where our priorities overlap.
Right.
In past mayoral administrations, they provided, like, the city gave the boards like the copies of the other boards' meeting minutes so that we could kind of see what everybody was doing. But they kind of stopped that. I mean, that was like another mayor's administration was doing that, and they kind of stopped that when we had a new mayor.
I mean, we got them off the city website. They're all listed on there. And I think I should be looking at those. And I just don't ever quite get to it because there's so many. But if there's a way to do that, yeah, that would be good too.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, our minutes are incredible. We have Dylan doing the minutes that
Yes,
I'm telling you, they're the best minutes that we've had since I've been a part of this board.
they are great. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan, for
Minutes
all
are
those
kind of a thankless
Happy
terrific
to help
words.
as long as they spell everyone's name right.
Baby steps, bit by bit. Well, I think that was a great introduction. I really appreciate the two of you coming out. It really, I think this is maybe just like, not to get hypothetical, but this is like the tip of the iceberg for how the Conservancy Board and the Environmental Commission could find ways to work together to not do like the double work where we're both, trying to figure out how to solve a problem independently, but be able to maybe align some of our efforts. And in that way, we could accomplish more than if we try to do everything separately. So I think that's one of really the things as chair of the Conservancy Board I'd really like to explore is, like you mentioned, Kathy, there are other groups, environmental groups that are doing watershed restoration, maybe doing some tree plantings. You've got Watershed Stewards Academy, you've got Seven River Association. So trying to unify everyone and different groups that have similar goals, in my opinion, is the best way to get where we're trying to go. So I really appreciate that you all reached out. And for next steps, I've shared the conservation map, and our board will review the green space qualities map, and think about it and discuss some of these high priority areas and some of the criteria that we can use to try to prioritize additional conservation areas.
It
Sounds
sounds
good.
great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
going to hang around. I'm going to hang around. I'd love to listen to the rest of your meeting. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to take the camera off though while I do that. So
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Thanks so much.
Nice to meet you all.
50 by 50. I remain optimistic. 25 years. I mean, we got to start now, but I'd love to think that we keep getting closer and closer each year. I think from my perspective, I would love to talk with the city forester and maybe invite him to one of our meetings, as I think that the AEC has had in the past, to understand what's our gap and how do we start to chip away at that. Any follow-up comments there before we get back into our agenda?
I'm just going to reiterate, I don't know if this has been done, but layering in land cover use data, property tax data, rank order all the parcels in order of which ones are not forested and are not housing or are not, other categories of land use. And then starting there, I mean, those are the biggest properties that need trees, and just kind of, and then you can batch those, right? There's going to be batches that are City of Annapolis, batches that are the county, Anne Arundel County, batches that are the federal government, batches that are state, and just like find out where the trees aren't. That's kind of step one in my mind.
Definitely think leveraging the canopy data like that could definitely work. It's a great suggestion. I don't know if I could include like the SStat data in there. That might include too sensitive information if you're talking about like who owns it and things like that.
I mean, it's public, it's on the Maryland website. I mean,
I suppose you're right. I'll just have to check with probably our GIS team. They like to be prudent. So yeah, I'll check on that. But no, those are great suggestions.
Yeah, and Aaron, I mean, Dylan, this map is so impressive. And Aaron, I see what you mean on the tree canopy component. It is pretty coarse as far as resolution goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just zoomed into a couple areas, and there's squares there that comprise the polygons, but I'm not sure that they actually, the resolution doesn't seem like it's effectively capturing all the tree canopy.
Yeah, there's a ton of publicly available source data on like really hyper granular. I mean, they get down to the foot. Like, is it a road? Is it a building? Is it a tree? Is it low vegetation? Like, gets super granular.
It's like the LULC, land use, land cover layers. Yeah, I think leveraging GIS and our spatial data is a huge tool in this quest to increase tree canopy and our other goals as well. So
And then you
I
could
do
start to score
think
them with other metrics too, like, you know, low income low income areas and things like that.
Definitely. Regarding the tree canopy layer, actually, I didn't even notice this myself. I'm looking at it actually live now. Um, in our desktop version, it does come out a lot higher quality than this. So I think maybe somewhere along the line of posting it as a web app might have reduced the quality. I'm not totally sure. I'll have to run it by our GIS team and see if they know anything about that. But it should be higher quality than this. But as it exists on the web map, it's to me it looks almost good enough. Definitely could be a lot better.
yeah, some
But
of the
yeah.
other layers just seem like they are a little more specific. But I mean, the tree canopy seems, I mean, when you click it, it shows you where the tree canopy is. They're just
Mhm.
they're just larger squares, so they can't get as
Yeah.
granular.
Yeah, I'll see if I can fix that.
Thanks, Dylan.
Mhm.
I'll just to mention, just a reminder that our map, since we're the Conservancy board, we were looking for areas to conserve that are already vegetated. So
Right.
our map doesn't identify, areas that are like parking lots. Like like we were looking at areas that are, you know, have natural value that are not protected in any way right now that we want to protect, especially if they were highly vulnerable to development.
Mhm.
There, yes, I think 99% is the case where a lot of these potential easements on this layer are already forested or have a environmental function. There are a couple though that I think present a potential tree canopy, tree planting opportunity, but by and large, especially the larger tracts are forested already. Absolutely. Okay. So I mean I think for our board, the ask here is to review this map that we've been provided and kind of think about how to start prioritizing uh, potential new easement areas with through the lens of adding tree canopy. And that's not our only goal, but I think recognizing that the city has a goal of 50% tree canopy by 2050, and the Environmental Commission has like targeted this specifically. I think if we can help with that, I think that would be all for the better. So everyone should have this map now. And I also really like what Aaron said about, rather than trying to brute force and just saying, let's just get as many conservation easements as we can, which is maybe a fine strategy too, but being a little bit more analytical about what are the highest priorities using the data that we can access. I like that idea. So on that note, we are about an hour in here. We can get started churning through our agenda. The first item that we've got here is approval of the minutes from the May 7th meeting. Apologies for circulating those a little bit behind schedule, but everyone should have them. And also, if everyone has access to the new Conservancy Board file, the Google Drive, those get posted in there. And Dylan, I'm not sure if you saw, but the way that I set it up was if you go into meeting materials, uh, each meeting I have a separate folder for, so the minutes and the agenda and any other materials would just go in that meetings folder, as opposed to having separate folders for every agenda, every minutes, every other materials. So that's the way that I set it up.
All right, sounds good.
So I would like to take this time, open the discussion on the minutes. I think they really captured things well. It's great to look back, be able to look back at the minutes and remember all the things that have been discussed. So any discussion about the minutes, I will open the floor. Not hearing any discussion, so I would look for a motion to approve the May 7th, 2025 Conservancy Board minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second by Sally. Thank you, Sally. So all in favor of approving the May 7th, 2025 Conservancy Board minutes, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like it was a unanimous vote.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dylan, for recording the minutes and sending them out.
Of course.
Okay, moving on to our duties and 2025 goals. If you'll notice, this agenda hasn't changed a ton from our last meeting, although I did add a few things and maybe remove a couple of others. Under the first bullet point here, soliciting the dedication of properties to the city. I think we just kind of talked about that and kind of through a new lens of looking at tree canopy and maybe equitable access and equitable conservation areas, strategies to identify new properties. I think Aaron really succinctly put it as far as using data. I think that's a great way to go forward. I had on here as another bullet was the interactive greenways map. I think we now have we have two maps now that we can use to try to start thinking about this. Any further discussion on the greenways map or how we can identify new properties? I know that we had kind of talked about having everyone bring some thoughts for how to prioritize this or properties to prioritize, but happy to have that discussion now with an open discussion. Okay. I also have on here the MOU with the county. Keeping that on here because I believe, I have hope that one day we will have an MOU. I want to do it for Karen and all of her previous colleagues who have served on the Conservancy Board, where I think this agenda item originally came up. We don't have a representative from the Office of Law this evening, and that's usually who we ask about the MOU with the county, but so I probably just keep moving on that item. Administer and manage said properties, our next duty. So Dylan, thank you for the reminder about the city's contractor, Macron, who is looking at some of what we've called like the data gaps and providing an update on that. Whenever you're ready to take the floor, I think we'd happily be interested to hear what Macron's been up to and how it's been, benefiting conservation and all the background on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to relay some of their findings. We've been working together for a while now. It's been pretty extensive, and they still have a couple phases left to complete. They're helping us kind of rectify, some of the kind of the boundaries to certain things. The Vitar easement in particular was one that kind of consists of a bunch of different easements that are piecemealed together. So they're kind of doing like a desktop survey to bring that together. And I was told that I'd get that by the end of this week. I was hoping before this meeting, but it is what it is. But after a lot of back and forth and research on that phase one of just kind of reviewing or kind of researching, where the deeds are, where the plats are, and what they say about any particular easement at those properties that we identified as problematic. Really not a lot of good news, unfortunately. It kind of seems as though that it might be largely what we feared is, some of these properties probably at some point in the planning commission phase were supposed to have an easement. It was agreed that there would be an easement. We reviewed, and this was part of the delay, we reviewed those approval documents for just about every property that we could. But unfortunately, during those days where a lot of these things were being made, It just wasn't very thoroughly recorded. So I hate to say it, but you know, um, their conclusion for Post Office Park was inconclusive. Their conclusion for Gardens of Annapolis, likewise inconclusive. Hawkins Cove, inconclusive. And I'm just really very briefly summarizing what they provided me. Severn House Condominium, inconclusive. Bill Jones Alley, that was a new one that was added in the scope of work. Um, Inconclusive. August Woods slash Vitar is what I was just talking about. So, yeah, there are plenty of easements there that are recorded. Kind of just some were added so that weren't properly recorded on the website. So there's going to be a little bit more there. So that's a spot of good news. Um, and yeah, like I said, they're going to be doing a bit of like a desktop survey and providing the city with an improved boundary, basically, of what that easement actually looks like. Um, Beechwood Hill is another one, and that's inconclusive. Georgetown Grove, inconclusive. Village Greens of Annapolis. Um, so there actually was a few conservation easements and deeds found for this one. Um, but there are some areas that seem to have been believed to be easements where it's still inconclusive as to whether or not those are actually reflected in the deed. They had suggested some further investigation, so we will probably be doing that in another phase. So those, were kind of just like those key problem easements that were identified in phase one. And again, largely inconclusive. Um, doesn't mean that it's just not something laying around that, might rectify the whole situation overnight. Basically, for those, what we believe to be current easements that were inconclusive, the most likely scenario for the future is going to be kind of, going back to the drawing board and, kind of just establishing that this was supposed to be recorded in the deed. It wasn't, or at least we don't believe it was. Um, and kind of just working with the property owner to, make sure that gets conserved into the future, so that future developments, um, you know, don't disrespect the verbal agreement that was established between the city and the developer back around. Most of these were around 2001. And then again, the further phases, going to be looking at some of those other ones that had minor issues. So just making sure that those are all, wrapped up and tied with a pretty bow. And then also investigating, more potential easements in the city, um, where, there seems to be some sort of indication that maybe this was an easement at some point. Um, And this came up because there actually were a few discovered during the early phases of this project that we had no idea were actually easements. So I suppose that's sort of the best news so far. Um, for an example, Robert Eads Park, there's actually more to that easement than we believed previously. Um, but overall, yeah, those ones which were particularly worrisome um, largely remain. Uh, Yeah, not totally, not the most secure.
I think inconclusive is a nice way to is a fine way
Yeah.
to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. Um, I'd like to provide a comprehensive report as soon as I can once we get kind of it all together from Macron. But they've been really great. You know, uh, we worked with them prior on recovering some of these issues, and they really know how to get these documents together. So, yeah, like I said, it's not, a matter of fact that these deeds or plats don't exist that state the easement clearly. Um, it's just that, our preferred partner was not able to find those. So yeah, a bit unfortunate, but yeah, happy to answer any questions about kind of, I don't know, how the process went or, how we ought to move forward.
Thanks, Dylan. That was really a lot of detail there. And, I think for, maybe for everyone on the board, but certainly for Patrick, who's here, Patrick, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, was kind of assigned as the data gaps czar for the Conservancy board. And Patrick, I remember you and I met a few times talking about where we were missing documents and, we didn't have this deed or there wasn't a reference for the plat here. And so I think for us at least, it may not be that surprising, but it is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to go back and say, well, can we actually record an easement if it was never actually recorded in the land records? Is there an opportunity to do that? Do we even need to do that? I don't have the answer, but
Mhm.
Yeah, I echo that sense, and I think it's a great job what you guys have done. Yeah, although it might not be great news, I think it's good news in that we at least we know something now.
Right.
And going back to Jack's question, for some of the items that were, in 2001, when a developer might have said that, hey, well, in order to get this plan approved, we're going to set aside this area for a conservation easement. Unfortunately, like you said, maybe certain documents were recorded. Is there at least something in writing that you found when you look back through the plan approvals to say, okay, yes, in fact, the developer did say that they would do this. The city just didn't follow through and get the document recorded.
Mhm. Yeah, great question. There are some drawings, there are some as-builts that do indicate in a few of these properties that there was a proposed easement, but those either didn't have a fully reflective plat in the end or really any plat on record. One in particular was that Gardens of Annapolis property, which did have an as-built, which said, as I just said, proposed easement, but never had a plat in the end. So yeah, for those, I think, the case of Planning Commission, clearly had discussed or had conveyed that an easement should be at this property. And so kind of getting that all in a comprehensive report, I think is going to be really important for how we move forward into that sort of kind of retroactive easement establishment phase, which I hope it gets to. I think that would be the right thing to do. But kind of all TBD a little bit. But yeah, that's
No, that makes
that's all
sense.
I'm saying.
Thank you for spearheading that, because we've been talking about it for years now, and it's nice that you came along and did it. So
Well, I was inspired by, just all the people who are, passionate about these things, you guys and MDRC and their Conservation Corps intern. So no, yeah, just happy to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. Oh, yeah, you guys have been really inspiring on this, actually.
thanks, Dylan. So more news soon, and maybe more steps soon. I think whether or not we can help, this board can help the city, Dylan, when the city decides if you'd like to try to retroactively record some of these easements. I think we should just keep that discussion open, and if there's ways that we can help, it seems squarely in our duties as assigned to support the city in those efforts. So
Yeah, maybe before we move on to new easements.
Yeah. Well, so I guess, yeah, right. I guess that's one of my questions is, in the summary you provided, it sounds like a lot of these, inconclusive results are from early 2000s, maybe
Mhm.
before, maybe a little bit after, but kind of early 2000 timeframe. So, for today, and I don't want to assume, but I just feel like today there are better procedures in place to make sure that an easement actually is getting recorded. And I don't know if you can speak to that, Dylan, but is that the case that, is this going to like, are we going to look back in 20 years from now and say, oh, we forgot to record that easement too, or are there different measures
Mhm.
in place just from your perspective? I realize you might not be the exact person to ask, but
No, I guess I don't know every single in and out of, how planning and zoning records these different things after they get approved. But, the biggest difference we have now is, we've got the recordings, of the meetings. We've got, better kept minutes. Just the whole record retention process is so much more streamlined, and backed up in several different ways. Um, that I think it would be really difficult, for at the very least, if it went from approved, there needs to be an easement here, and then it ended up not in the deed or the plat, we'd still at least know that the deed or the plat was not reflective, of the planning commission approval and therefore in violation. Right. So we would at least have that planning commission, documentation to back it up. And that's really sort of the biggest strain here in these older documents is like we're going to keep on looking, but we don't really have anything that's just completely solidified from the planning commission uh, for any right now. So no, yeah, I do think the process has improved significantly, substantially, just purely based on the technology, that we use for recording these things.
Hey,
excellent.
Dylan,
Thank you.
one thing just to keep in mind when you're going through these, uh, is that I know that the city used to call a lot of things conservation easements that weren't really conservation easements, like things that were just like
Open space.
vegetation strips,
Mhm.
example, in front of strip malls.
Sure.
So and like when you were going through the list, there were a lot of names that I didn't recognize. So just something to keep in mind so that there's not you aren't spending like a whole lot of time on things that aren't really conservation easements anyway.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think having people like you around, Karen, it's really important because we might not know that. So, we'll definitely kind of bounce around these names. I do think that most of them have some sort of logical reason why, they might have been considered an easement. Um, it's just about kind of getting that, solid, um, dedication, nailed down somewhere.
Excellent. Thanks, Dylan. That was really helpful, and I think everybody's looking forward to, a final kind of comprehensive report for what sounds like the first phase of their work, and then, looking ahead and thinking about how our board could support anything along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope to have something, very comprehensive for the next meeting. And then, we'll have to have some internal discussions, about, how we ought to move forward. I think we'll probably need to have some conversations with the Office of Law, some conversations, with DPZ, maybe even the Planning Commission. But, I think we'll have to, uh, figure out like how we're gonna tackle this issue, and then we can bring you guys in and leverage your advisory role, and also hopefully, if you guys are willing, put some boots on the ground, um, and maybe providing some letters of support and things like that. Like I was just talking about, using your institutional knowledge will be really invaluable to us. So yeah, definitely looking forward to moving forward with you guys, to make sure that these stay conservation easements.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan.
Hmm.
All right. Really healthy discussions here so far. I think that, as we may not have as much discussion some of these next items coming up. The next bullet point on our agenda, that third or second main bullet under administer and manage said properties, is city web map development. We've covered that. That was part of the discussion with the Environmental Commission. So everyone should have that link that I sent out. And just keeping in mind that, this is really for the Conservancy Board and the Environmental Commission to be able to bounce ideas about prioritizing things and where to start looking for adding canopy cover. Next up on the agenda, I have the Parole Place and Thomas Woods easements. I haven't heard anything new about the Parole Place easement, other than there's the development there with, potential new easement coming along with it. It's up near, but kind of behind Sin Fronteras and the liquor store there on Old Forest Drive. Thomas Woods, I drove past again this week, and it looks totally complete. So Patrick, I know you and I made a pilgrimage there probably a year or more ago now, when it was just kind of getting under construction. But at some point we should try to get out there, and maybe I'll take an action to connect with the property owner and just make sure that we have permission, and keep you copied in, Dylan, as well, just to take a look at those easement areas, make sure they're not just paved over or whatever kind of condition they're in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go take a look.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
And on that note, easement inspections, our next agenda item, I had circulated a spreadsheet, the 2025 sign up sheet for easement monitoring. So we hadn't been as on top of it. Yes, I see someone's in here commenting. I got it open right now. So what I did, I kind of arbitrarily, I tried to kind of think about where folks live and try to assign a couple easements that maybe are closer to their house, or, I just tried to be equitable in assigning easements and keep the number fair to everyone. As you'll see, as your selfless chair, I assigned myself one additional easement than everyone else. But just trying to get some coverage for our easement inspections and monitoring. I think it really is an important part of what the Conservancy Board is assigned to do as an advisory body to the city. We need to look at these easements and then make recommendations if, there's a multitude of invasive species, ivy climbing up the trees, and the ground covers just doesn't look like it's in good shape, or there's a lot of trash, or there's been trespass and there's a structure built, whatever it may be. I think really it is important to get out and put eyes on these easements. The list that I provided is not every single conservation easement, and I'm using kind of air quotes because, like, as Karen said, there were some areas that we didn't think necessarily needed to be monitored every year because it wasn't a stand of trees, it was a strip of grass, or it was, it just didn't really constitute a conservation area that had high function and environmental benefits. So we thought this was kind of a manageable list of some of the larger and kind of more significant conservation easements. We could certainly add to this. I don't think I'd want to necessarily subtract anything. And even on this list, there's a couple like Acton Landing and Hospital. That really is kind of a park. Like, Karen, I know we've talked, that's like the goose, where the goose statues are, or duck, people call it Duck Park. We had talked before about, is that really a conservation easement, or is it, kind of a city parklet or park? So, I mean, I'm open to adding some or changing some of the easements that are listed on here, but just to get us kind of thinking about and start to get out and look at some of these easements, use the monitoring form. Karen, Tom, Sally, thank you all, for the three of you, for coming out. We did, I think last month, we did a meetup at the Children's Museum, and we walked the easement. We talked about the form that we have. I think Sally had some really good ideas about creating a digital form. And Sally, I'm sorry that we didn't have a chance to catch up between that meeting and now with furthering that idea, but I'll look into that, and I can circulate that to the group. So we have a paper form that you can use, but Sally has wonderfully created a Google form that we can use to capture similar data, which you can do from your phone, which really makes it a little bit more convenient, in my opinion. So yeah, I'd like to target, by December 31st that we get all of these easements listed in the list I sent out and maybe a couple others. If they're worthy of a monitor and inspection. So happy to discuss that with anyone. Aaron, I see that you've taken a look, and I'm happy to join anybody. And it's not an intimidating process. It's just getting boots on the ground, kind of like Dylan said, getting our boots on the ground, getting eyes on these easements, taking some notes, taking a couple photos. It really shouldn't take that long. And then we can use that information to decide, do we need to take a management action to protect this easement? So happy to open the floor for any discussion about easement monitoring, inspections, assignments, any of that. Okay. If anybody has any questions too, you can always give me a call or shoot me a text or email about easement monitoring. But I can make sure that everyone has the paper form and also the Google form, and that everyone knows where there is a specific folder in our Google Drive where those easement monitoring reports should live. So once you have done the easement monitoring, where those files should go, just so we've got everything organized. Because it sounds like in 2001, we were not as organized. So we will not repeat the mistakes of the past, hopefully. All right, so easement inspections, that was kind of one of my big things for this meeting, was assigning easement inspections and getting out there. So we'll keep moving on. Save Our Trees. I had another brief discussion with Save Our Trees between last meeting and this meeting. They'd really like to, similar to actually the AEC, the Environmental Commission, they would like to work with the Conservancy Board on protecting existing easements and increasing tree canopy. They're trying to do some now with increasing canopy and removing invasives. So I don't really have a substantive update with Save Our Trees, other than still trying to coordinate with them on how we can do another invasive removal or multiple invasive removals and protect the existing tree canopy. Encouraging the preservation of environmentally sensitive land. I think that goes kind of hand in hand with some of the discussions we've already had, our new easement initiative. And, to speak to the point that Karen made earlier, that on the Conservancy boards, or the Greenway map that the Conservancy board really built and helped significantly to build, a lot of those properties, and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of those identified potential new easements are environmentally sensitive land, or could be. It's not a parking lot. It's not like they already are, potentially have good environmental value. They're just not currently protected. Right? That's kind of the basis of a lot of those easements or potential easements. So I think that's a little bit different than what the Environmental Commission is trying to do with increasing tree canopy, because you can't really get double trees if it's already a forested piece of land. So I think trying to balance those priorities of preserving environmentally sensitive land and also adding trees, I don't know how we prioritize those two goals, and maybe they can kind of work alongside each other, but those are a little bit different, I think. And then under here we have our new easement initiative, which we've talked about, and then our partnerships. So I had bolded the Environmental Commission. We spoke with them earlier, had a really nice discussion. I did get an email from MDRRC, but it was within the last day or two, and I've been so tied up, I didn't have a chance to respond yet. But continuing our partnership with MDRRC, they've come and spoken to us before. They've been working on invasive monitoring. They've been working on, conservation around the city, especially with their Conservation Corps member. And I think Sally has been excellent in, with her strength that she brings with partnerships. Sally, I don't know if you have any partnerships, topics you want to speak to, but I know we had a couple, we burned pretty hot there, reaching out to a bunch of different partners. And, I think that we're still kind of in process with that partnerships effort.
Yeah, no, I had some side conversations just kind of catching myself up on the community of conservation easements, talking with Scott Himes with the Crownsville Conservancy, and then Sarah Nebel, who's now with BG&E, formerly with Scenic Rivers Land Trust, and had a good conversation with both of them. Scott is in the business of buying property, so and it's also in Anne Arundel County, or I'm sorry, he goes beyond Anne Arundel County. So a little bit of a different approach. And then Scenic Rivers Land Trust, they're in Anne Arundel County, and they are primarily looking at larger parcels. So again, a little bit of a different approach, but I was learning about how to acquire land. I was learning about some tips on, let's see what Scott had to say. He said to ensure that signs are indicating property ownership and regulations are put up and maintained. Include contact information on the sign for maintenance and notification purposes. The key to maintenance is coordination with local stewards. The more eyes on a site, the better. And it would be great to create a network of neighbors to maybe put on a listserv that we can check in periodically with about the status of a site. There used to be this cool named group called the Anne Arundel Land Trust Alliance, which was essentially a big um, uh, like a big group of organizations focused on conservation, and they would bring properties up, and whoever would be most suited to attack that issue or take over that property would tag in, or they would allow for partnerships between organizations. And that organization or that group has since gone defunct, but I'd be interested to know if anybody in this space was a part of that Anne Arundel Land Trust Alliance, and or if that's something that we'd be interested in seeing happen again.
Hmm.
Um, is anybody familiar with that Anne Arundel Land Trust Alliance? Yeah, it's
No,
news to me, but it sounds cool, doesn't it?
it certainly does.
Yeah, I think it'd be really a cool thing to reinvigorate. So I gotta try to track down a point of contact for where that network started and who was hosting it, and then how to go about information sharing and partnership leveraging moving forward. Talking to Sarah Nebel, I learned about how financial incentives from easements come from grants, private donations, program open space, and forest conservation and critical area fee in lieu dollars. Again, a lot of this was just catching myself up on the like my personal knowledge on conservation easements, in addition to things that I could bring back to the board. Outreach can be conducted within a community network, knowing who knows the landowner you're trying to reach. I really think that Watershed Stewards Academy is a fantastic resource for trying to figure out who knows the landowners that we're trying to reach, and does that land already have a reputation in the community for one reason or another? Is there already community interest in preserving the area, or are we kind of coming out of left field with it? That kind of context is really valuable to get when we're trying to pursue new easements. Questions. Oh, I asked lastly to Sarah, what are some of the most commonly asked questions by landowners considering easements? So again, going in back to that new easement initiative conversation. Um, so some of the most commonly asked questions were, what does permanent mean? What are the limitations of the easement? Can the landowner expand their home down the line? Does the property need a survey, and who's going to pay for that? And then what expenses will a landowner incur in the process, i.e. hiring a lawyer to secure that easement officially? So lots of good information for me to learn about how easements work and who is already in that space. And if anybody has any questions, definitely let me know. If I can send any questions back to Scott or Sarah, let me know. If you'd like to have either of them, both of them come to a meeting. They both expressed interest in that. But again, I had a lot of personal questions about easements that I didn't want to bog down everybody's time with. So I just did that on the side as a beginning, but they both expressed interest in joining the whole group. So that's the summary.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you've already asked a lot of the right questions, and I even learned a couple things there as far as what are some common concerns that landowners have. Being not a landowner, I've never had to concern myself with if someone wanted to put an easement on my property. And I think understanding, putting yourself in their shoes and understanding how you can approach that, I think is really helpful. And Scott and Sarah, and I think we emailed with Josh and with Save Our Trees and with Vanessa and Diane and Devin at Maryland Resource Reentry Center. So just kind of keeping those partnerships going, because like I said, we're all going to get further if we work together than trying to do things separately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think considering inviting other folks to our meetings in the future to either ask questions or kind of just get some feedback on what we're doing, and maybe even some guidance of how we could improve and kind of refocus our efforts would be really helpful. So
Yeah.
Queen of the Hill, thank you.
Framework.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions there for Sally on partnerships, or any ideas or comments on partnerships between the Conservancy Board and other community groups and individuals? Excellent. That's something I'm personally really excited about, partnerships. All right, under our next duty, further implementing goals for improving water quality. I don't have a ton of substantive updates here. I think these have carried over from the last meeting. The SRA's priority, watershed evaluation identified the Weems Creek watershed, which mostly falls within the city, if not, it's like 90% in the city. Weems Creek is the #1 priority watershed. So I've spoken with Ben and Jesse just kind of intermittently on, ideas they have for projects in that area. And there is a potential new easement, I believe, over on Weems Creek. So just kind of thinking about how we could support and work with other groups that are looking at the Weems Creek watershed for watershed restoration, and how that could tie into, Conservancy Board responsibilities and our duties. So keeping Weems Creek.
There were some parcels in that watershed on our list of targeted areas for easements, so maybe that's something that.
Yeah, there's that pesky WNAV, parcel, and I think there were a few others. I think one of them was near the city. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought there were some in Wardour or that area, like West Annapolis.
Yeah, and I know one of the ones in Wardour is. I talked with someone who lives in that neighborhood in West Annapolis recently, and they just had a grand opening or some sort of. They had the city has a Tolson Street end park, and there's some kind of work going on with that. And then there was another one further up that I'm not as familiar with. And then there's the old rail bed that runs there, like right out to the Severn. And that might not be in Weems Creek, but yeah, so there are a few potential new easements identified in Weems Creek area. So, maybe it would be worth sharing at least these potential new easements in Weems Creek watershed with SRA, and getting any thoughts they have on if they know status of any of them, or if they have spoken with the landowners, and just maybe trying to get some of their thoughts. And then the whole Watershed Act, which, as I think we all know now, the Severn River was awarded as one of the 5 whole watersheds. I don't have a clear idea for how the Conservancy Board is supporting the whole Watershed Act. I think we're interested in supporting that. And Dylan, I don't know if you would have any ideas, but however the Conservancy Board could support the whole Watershed Act, I think it's a really big undertaking. And maybe just through all the other work that we do, we are supporting the whole Watershed Act. But any way that we can play a role to support the Severn under the whole Watershed Act would be, I think, of interest to our board.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep you guys in the loop.
Thanks, Dylan. And then last but certainly not least, under our duties is providing for additional recreational development resources in the city. Don't know if we have any substantive updates here either. We don't have someone from the Office of Law, but the Kingsport easement, I know that was a little bit in flux. I'm not sure if there's any updates there. And the Hawkins Cove and Truxton Connector Trail, at our last meeting, Dylan informed us that there was some funding secured and that project was going to move forward. So Dylan, I'm not sure if there's anything else to share or if there's any way that we can help support that process of establishing that new trail and connection, but
no updates as of now. I know that the Maryland Department of Public Works, maybe is it Bureau? Public Works, had approved of the funds and actually ended up being 700,000, I believe.
Wow.
But I think it's kind of still in that process of, finalizing all those little things and transferring and all that type of stuff. So I'll try to get an update as to where that's at, but yeah, I don't think any real movement in terms of like city staff is on that quite yet. But yeah, I anticipate also being able to keep you guys in the loop on that.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, that's actually might have seen it. It's the Board of Public Works. They put out their agenda I think every other week. And I think I saw that.
Yeah, board, that's right. Thank you.
Truxton Connector was mentioned. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then finally, under updates and new business, our terms. Karen, I'm not sure if we ever answered the question about renewing your term. Do you remember? I think we reached out to
It
Hillary.
sounded like Hillary Raftovich just auto renewed me.
Okay.
So, but I mean, at this point, like I joined the board in 2008, so I would like to step down, but I'll hang on until you can find somebody.
That would be very
Because I think we
beneficial.
already are. Are we already down a person anyway?
We
How
are
many?
down a
1, 2, 3,
person.
4, 5, 6.
Our full board slate is 7 members from, I think, based on our bylaws. And I'd like to get up to 7. And so, I mean, Karen, you've served your time. I mean, the city owes you your gold Rolex and your pension, or I understand being ready to retire from the board. I would certainly appreciate if you wanted to stay on, as we kind of transition and try to find a good replacement. Hopefully they can, fill your shoes even to some degree. But yeah, that would really be appreciated. And if you need to depart, also, I think everybody would thank you for your service. And yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'll stick around till at least we get another person.
Thank you.
So.
And then, then this kind of leads me into the next thing is the goals for the full board slate. So trying to find right now 1 and maybe potentially 2 new board members. I guess 2, maybe even 3 new board members. So I think I may have some ideas, but I think at this point, if anyone from the board has suggestions or recommendations for someone who would be a good addition to the Conservancy board, I think that we'd be happy to entertain that. And Sally and Aaron being the newer members, I think we now understand the process for recommending someone and having them submit an application, and then it goes to the city and ultimately gets approved by the mayor. So if anyone has any ideas, I would love to have our goal, have a full board slate maybe by the end of this year. So just think if there's anyone you think would be good on this commission or on this board. Very appreciated.
Is Hillsmere in the city?
No,
I didn't think so. Dang it.
I know.
I know of somebody in Hillsmere that I think would be a really good fit that works in the city, but yeah.
Hey, working in the city, I'd have to check the actual language of who can and can't be on the
No,
board.
you have to live in the city, unfortunately. Yeah.
Toiling in the city is not enough.
Yeah.
Working in the city doesn't count.
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's all I have. Happy to turn the floor over to anyone with any final comments or any new business. Thank you everybody for being here. Okay.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you everybody. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate you guys'
I'll move
time.
to, I'll move to adjourn if you're ready.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Sally has seconded. All in favor of adjourning this meeting of the Conservancy Board at 7:11 p.m.
Aye.
Aye.